Two 10-year-old boys once sent shivers down the spine of the entire world. Their actions were so monstrous that 300,000 adults signed a petition demanding their execution. What did these children do that was so unforgivable, so incredibly cruel? Today, we're talking about the UK's youngest murderers. It was February 12, 1993, in Liverpool, England. A mother and her 2-year-old son, James Bulger, were at a shopping center. The mother briefly stepped into a butcher shop, telling James to wait by a nearby storefront. When she turned back, James was gone. She frantically searched the entire mall, but he was nowhere to be found. Security footage later revealed a horrifying sight: James being led away by two boys who appeared to be around 10 years old. Initially, the police weren't overly concerned. They thought perhaps James had simply wandered off with some friends or gone to play at another child's house. Their immediate task was to find these two older boys. 2 days later, James Bulger's mutilated body was found on a railway line, his head buried in the gravel between the tracks. The autopsy confirmed it was the missing 2-year-old. The injuries revealed a horrifying truth: he had been subjected to unspeakable torture before his death. Such brutal violence led police to initially suspect a depraved adult offender. However, a chilling detail on the security footage changed everything: a tiny shoe print near the railway tracks. Police quickly linked this to the fact that James had been led away by two children. A nationwide manhunt was launched for the two boys, and schools were checked for absent students on the day of the abduction. Soon, tips came in. Witnesses recalled seeing two older boys dragging and kicking a small child down the street that day. Passers-by assumed it was just siblings roughhousing and paid little attention. If even one person had intervened, this tragedy might have been averted. Police quickly identified Robert Thompson and John Venables, both 10 years old, who had skipped school that day. Thompson's mother had reported her son absent. They were immediately arrested. Fingerprints collected at the crime scene, along with traces of blood that can't be completely washed away by water, were compared to DNA samples from the boys. The evidence linking them to the crime was overwhelming. Their interrogations were fully recorded. Because the police were dealing with minors, they couldn't use aggressive tactics. In the first interview, Thompson began to crack, shifting all blame onto John Venables and trying to completely exonerate himself. But his lies were transparent. He even denied being at the scene and repeatedly disrupted the interview, screaming and crying for his mother. The next day, realizing he couldn't deceive them any longer, Thompson confessed in the presence of his guardian. The case's exposure sent shockwaves across the UK and the world. Why would two 10-year-old boys commit such a monstrous act? Thompson and Venables were known as troublemakers, constantly skipping school and stealing. On one of their truancies, they met and quickly became inseparable. Their mischief escalated from petty theft to more disturbing acts. They stole food, batteries, and a can of blue paint. Growing bored, they craved something more exciting. The blue paint gave them a twisted idea. They soon spotted James Bulger, alone and vulnerable. They seized their chance and led him away. What followed was an unimaginable act of cruelty. Near a canal, they began beating James. Their savagery escalated. They allegedly rubbed paint into his eyes and forced him to eat batteries. They then picked up bricks and smashed them into James's head. Finally, they left his body on the railway tracks, covering his head with rocks, hoping a train would hit him, making it look like an accident. The revelation of their actions ignited public fury. The question of how to sentence two 10-year-old murderers became a national debate, akin to sentencing a mentally ill individual. On November 1, 1993, the Preston Crown Court began the trial. Nearly 500 protesters gathered outside, demanding justice. After a thorough preparation, the trial proceeded with an adult-style proceeding. Judge Moreland reviewed all evidence and 20 hours of recorded interviews before declaring both boys guilty of murder, abduction, and attempted abduction. They were sentenced to a minimum of 8 years in custody, with restrictions on their activities upon release. Shortly after the verdict, the UK's Sun newspaper collected 2.8 million signatures on a petition demanding that age should not be a shield for such crimes, implicitly calling for the death penalty or at least lifelong incarceration. The boys' sentence was ultimately increased to 15 years, meaning they wouldn't be eligible for release until February 2008. However, after serving only 8 years, Their parole hearing in June 2001 determined that Robert Thompson and John Venables no longer posed a threat to public safety, and they were released. They began new lives under new identities. But John Venables, in particular, showed little sign of remorse. After his supervision was relaxed, he was repeatedly recalled to prison for offenses including alcohol abuse, drug use, vehicle violations, and possession of prohibited items. In 2010, at age 27, Venables' new identity was leaked, putting his life in danger. Police assisted him in relocating, but during the transfer, they discovered a shocking collection of child abuse images on his computer, thousands of them. Deemed a severe risk to society, he was sentenced to another 3 years and 4 months in prison. His subsequent parole applications have been denied. The tragic case of James Bulger has long fueled debate about the psychological factors contributing to such extreme violence in children. Criminologist Lester has stated that almost all violent murderers and criminals share common threads in their backgrounds. Indeed, Thompson and Venables' childhoods bear striking similarities. Both boys came from broken homes, and their parents were reportedly neglectful, failing to provide the care and basic education they needed. As a result, they began running with bad crowds, truancy, theft, and violence becoming part of their daily lives. The immaturity of their developing minds, combined with such a dysfunctional upbringing, made this horrific act almost inevitable.